we can clearly see there are other parts of the world that are a lot faster than we are.
So the first question I want to ask both of you is, where is robotics headed in Europe?
Well, we have a great starting position at the moment, because on the one hand I can see a surge of creativity, because there are so many new startups coming up, and it's fascinating to see. I'm in touch with these startups. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of all the new names that appear on the scene, and I just love engaging with these people because they have so many creative ideas. They want to reinvent robotics, and they've come a long way already. On the other hand, Europe has a very good manufacturing sector, state-of-the-art, cutting edge, and a lot of, let's say, more traditional robotics companies that are also super innovative and very, very well positioned. So I think the incumbents that are there are very good, and also a huge startup scene, a huge surge of new things coming up.
Yes, and I completely agree. And then you can also add all the potential in robotics, because there's, of course, the manufacturing sector with traditional industrial robots, then logistics, which is already going on also, and then all the new areas for robotics, which is like offshore, hospitals,
the service robotics,
food industry, and a lot of other industries. Construction is also coming. So there's enormous potential. And I also agree that Europe is in a good position because we have a good understanding of the, you can say, deeper technology and the hardware. And then there's just so much potential also.
Like one example the other day, a startup, they made a robot that roams the fields, an agricultural robot that uses a Delta robot that's very low cost, and it has like a little laser, and it tries to find the weed and avoids the crop, but finds the weed, and then you have kind of Star Wars on the field, like the laser shoots the weed, and you don't need pesticides.
Right.
How great is that?
Yeah. How is it different from elsewhere in the world, and what differences do you see, and how do you see Europe centrally positioning itself more strongly in robotics?
Yeah, I think we have a very good technological level in robotics, many robot companies. Europe is value driven. Yeah? We look into values, the whole AI discussion at the moment. Europe wants to mitigate risks, and I think this is very good. I think we need to do that. But one area where I have a bit of concern in Europe is that too often, there's a bit of an angst, like this, will there be risks? It's risk averse, whereas when I look to the US, I think as general, they breathe the air of let's try something new, let's see what we can achieve, what is the potential. And I think we can learn a little bit from other areas, parts of the world where people are a bit more, they have their endeavors, they want to create new things, and I think we just have to use the potential.
Yeah, I agree. From the technology point of view, Europe is as good as it gets. From the people point of view, also really good. I mean, a lot of skill and competences. So the main challenge is Europe is maybe we have the labor unions who are sometimes against robotics, sometimes for robotics.
Increasingly for, I must say.
Increasingly for, exactly. It's going the right way, and people are understanding we don't want the jobs that the robots are good at anyhow. And that's a way also to keep competitiveness and so on in Europe. So it's slowly, you can say, going the right way for robotics and for the labor force, I would add. But from the political point of view, there's, as Patrick mentioned, a lot of concern on what is okay and not okay. And that concern can be very damaging to the potential for robotics. And that's probably what we're going to talk about also now.
Okay, there's educated, qualified people, and we have a technical revolution and advancement, and all the engineers and all the trained people, they get great opportunities. But what happens to those that have no formal training, that maybe work in a factory and do simple repetitive tasks? And then the robot comes in, does the simple repetitive task, and then the person is out.
Yeah.
And I think we're at the brink of a completely new era in robotics, where all these people that maybe are not qualified But they all have their mobile phone, they have their apps, they're not computer programmers, but they effectively use computer every day. And if we would make the robot accessible to people who are not formal computer scientists or roboticists, and exactly this is happening at the moment, then I believe we were leaving no one behind, and not only that, we will give a great opportunity to people to move on from low qualified jobs to much more qualified jobs and jobs that are much more rewarding.
And value creating, yes.
For example, there's no-code robotics or drag and drop programming, it's all there. So basically, if you need to program a robot to put glue on a very complex part, that's very difficult. But if you have a pen with which you just trace the contour, and then you press a button and the robot is programmed, then everybody can do that.
And the interesting thing, the robot has no clue what good quality looks like to the consumer. So it doesn't. You can get a robot to put glue on some part, but you don't know what quality looks like. The robot doesn't know that. So there needs to be a human there that understands the consumer, the end user, a lot better than the robot ever will be able to. And now suddenly that person who used to do the glue is now programming a robot to do the glue, but that person is still super important to understand the process. And the robot frees up time, so this person can go back to where the glue or the part is coming from and say, if you do this and this better, then the end product will be better. The person can go out into the next step and see, okay, if I can optimize here. So suddenly the worker becomes a knowledge expert.
And a troubleshooter.
And a troubleshooter and all these things, which is way more value creating than spending your whole day putting this glue on this part all day long. And that's the trend we're seeing. So it's actually super useful to have all these people in production that understand what's going on and then let the robots do the repetitive work. And we see that all the time.
So I think we're not leaving anybody behind in this, but we have a huge opportunity to further develop a lot of jobs and to give people the opportunity to have better workplaces.
So if we look at the comparison between the European robotics or elsewhere in the world, for example, Asia, how does it play out? What differences do you see?
An anecdote, we're sitting together with roboticists and associations from all over the world. I think it was in Asia, it was in Korea, I believe, talking about robotics. Americans, Europeans, and Asian professionals. And the discussion was about robots, labor market impacts, job losses, how the public perceives robotics industries, and risks, and all this political discussion. And the Asians were kind of, what are you talking about? And it was really interesting because it's very clear that all these Asian countries, China, Japan, Korea, and so on, they embrace robotics. The people there embrace it. You can see it. The governments embrace it. And a lot of issues which we have are non-issues there. Very interesting to see.
Right.
And then when we look at the global competition, we have the biggest market for robots is Asia, and the biggest producer probably too. So it's huge, and you have a population that embraces it.
Right.
That's a big factor.
Yes.
A competitive factor, and we should be aware of it in Europe.
Absolutely.
Can I just ask a follow-up question there? So why do you think that fear is in Europe? Because I often wonder about that. I mean, they have an aging population in Japan and so on, so they need robots, but I don't think that's the reason. They just really like robots. And in Europe, we have a tradition for being very technology focused also, but why is there this hesitance for robotics in labor unions and among the politicians in some countries in Europe?
I'm not sure, but one philosophical explanation that is given sometimes, that Asia embraces robotics more than maybe the Western world, is Shintoism, where you go to a park and you have a rock, and this rock is an inanimate object, but in this religion or philosophy, inanimate objects have a soul. That's why if you go into these Zen gardens or whatever, and the way they sculpt rocks and stones, and it's all inanimate objects. But I think in this philosophy, it has a soul, and maybe that makes it more accessible for people to have this robot, which is basically an arm made of steel with eyes, maybe with a camera. They have less of a qualm or a problem with seeing that's an inanimate thing, to see that as something interesting with a soul or something. Although clearly it doesn't have a soul, as we discussed previously. But maybe that's one of the reasons. I don't know.
Well, maybe.
Yeah, quite interesting.
Yeah.
It's a theory.
So what is your overall impression of how are we doing in robotics in the EU? Where do we stand?
I think, as I said, a great starting point. We have a lot that is going to help us. Competences, great companies. We have Odense, which is wonderful what we have there. It's very powerful as an ecosystem, and Europe can be very proud of that, to have it. If they wanted to create it with funding, they wouldn't manage to. This is really something unique. But one of the things I think that we need to make sure is we need to pick up more speed. Also with all the discussion about AI regulation and bureaucracy, bureaucratic burdens, we're in the process of adding maybe more bureaucracy when in a global competitive race, we can clearly see there are other parts of the world that are a lot faster than we are. And we need to pick up speed.
And I completely agree. We have the right technology in Europe and also the right intentions, but we are making it hard for ourselves with all the kind of the stones we put in the way. And we don't need much kind of say burden on the competitiveness before you simply lose the race. There's only going to be one winner in the world, and the less friction you can have in an area is what's going to create those winners. And it's very important that we don't make it hard for ourselves. And that's the main, you can say, concern for Europe right now.
Yeah, I think this is such an important point. The message is clear. We need more speed.
Yes.